Welcome to the next installment of the PhoneUX Protocol, where I'm going to be reviewing the Pixel 9 Pro to see how it stacks up against the others that have already gone through the process. So let's get started right away, and the first thing I start with is the pinky shelf test to determine how comfortable it is to hold with the weight on your pinky, which in my case, that's the most common way that I hold my phone. So instantly when I pick it up, the size is very noticeable. It's on the smaller side of what's available nowadays. So it's around 6.2 to 6.3 inch screen, which it's small, and it's going to lead to being a little bit lighter. However, it's kind of like the iPhone, that it's kind of heavy for its size. It's at just under 200 grams, which kind of competes with some of the larger phones that are out there, but that are made a bit lighter. But besides that, it's actually very comfortable. So besides the fatigue you'll get from the weight, everything is super smooth in the bottom, as you would expect from modern flagship phones. If anything is sharp down there, honestly, it's a big miss. It has the flat sides and it's polished, so you get extra grip because of that. So that kind of helps a little bit with reducing the weight on the pinky, because it kind of gets some extra friction from the other hands that are in play here. I will say, in terms of reaching across, the size is obviously one of the better ones, because it doesn't really get much smaller than this anymore. But the other thing is that it's not too slippery of a phone. It's gonna feel a bit more secure than I have noticed with some of the other phones that are very slippery. And then the last thing that I want to mention with the ergonomics is that the button placement is awesome. Even though it is a small phone, so it's pretty easy to get the buttons in a good position. Pixel itself, doesn't really matter what size the phone is, has good placement for the buttons, so I always appreciate that. So for the ergonomics, I'm gonna give it a very high 9 out of 10. The next thing that we're gonna be covering is the camera speed, because one of the important parts is to be able to capture the moment and not be delayed by the camera. So in the event that it's coming out of your pocket, the quickest way to open the camera is always going to be the double pressing of the power button, or at least, for Android. So by doing this, we'll see how quickly it boots up, and it's pretty much instant. There is a little boot up black screen there, but it's going to be ready to take a photo before you're ready to take the photo. So from this position, you have the ability to take the picture with the volume button, so that means less of a movement for quick captures, but you obviously can't take it with the shutter button. In terms of speed, this is very responsive. It's giving me a visual feedback as well as a haptic feedback whenever I press the shutter button, which is great, and it doesn't seem to miss a beat. You can switch to video very quickly because it's basically a toggle here, and you start on the basic video or basic photo modes, which is awesome. The one downside here is that you cannot change the order of the modes. The positive thing is that a single swipe can take you past more than one mode. You go all the way to the end almost with a single swipe. So it is going to be very easy to move around the app. And then the last thing that I want to cover with the camera speed, it's going to be, because not every phone can do this to begin with, but 50 megapixel or high res mode, depending on which phone you're using. Seems to have a bit of a processing delay, so it's not the fastest, but it's pretty instant when you press the button. But one thing I noticed that I didn't notice on the Pixel 10 Pro Fold, because it doesn't have the 50 megapixel mode, is that it has a very small buffer. Like, I'm gonna press the shutter button a few times, and we'll notice that there's gonna be a moment there that it completely stops and doesn't let you take any more photos. And it's actually not a very large number. So all right, 1, 2, 3, that's it, 3. After the third one, look how long it takes to take the next shot. So it is quick for the initial shot, and it's okay for the next 3 follow-up shots, but to take continuous photos at 50 megapixel, it's not a very good experience in that sense. So even with that last point, I am going to give it a very good 8 out of 10. The next category is going to be the haptics, and we already know Google has very good haptics. So for starters, you do get plenty of haptic feedbacks, obviously, holding it, but swiping down you get it as well. You do get it with the volume, in between volume, and actually at the bottom and top. It's not as noticeable as OnePlus's, but it's there and it's actually very nice. The style of haptic that you get on this phone is more of that thump type of feeling, which I think feels great. It has like a deeper feel to it versus a light tap that a lot of other phones go with. I'm not gonna say one is better than the other, but I like this style better than the others. I think a good one to bring up is the feel while typing, because some phones either have a delay or something else, and this phone, obviously it's Google Pixel, they're one of the best at this, it has zero delay. It's on point with when you're pressing it, so it feels like you're very in tune with the typing, and it's just a perfect feel, honestly. You can adjust it lower than out of the box, you can go upward, but I think the way it is out of the box is just basically perfect. None of them have all the different styles of haptic feedback, but in terms of the overall number of what's available, Pixel is towards the top, and it's one of the better experiences in every way for haptics. And for the haptics, I'm gonna give the Pixel 9 Pro a very high 9 out of 10. Now we're gonna be moving to the Immersion. Okay, so with the speakers, I'm gonna start off with just the balance of the speakers. It's a very good sounding set of speakers. It's got more bass than a lot of the other phones go with, but it has just enough highs and mids to work with the bass that it comes with. So it is very bassy, but a good experience overall. Now in terms of the top to bottom balance, it still doesn't keep up as well as it should, as well as other phones do. The top still is a bit weaker on the highs and mids than on the bottom, which kind of takes away from that whole stereo experience. So it's not gonna give you as good as an experience as what I would say Samsung and iPhone are currently pushing out right now. The screen on this phone is great. It's got a high refresh rate, and it has a high resolution, which not every phone in this size has. A lot of them just stay with a 1080p because it's gonna be sharp enough for a good experience. The other thing is that it's also very bright, so when you're outside, you're not gonna have any trouble viewing it. And I like the colors that Pixel uses. It feels like it's a bit deeper than what Samsung uses. Samsung uses a bit more of a brighter scheme, versus Pixel using what I would consider a deeper, maybe more contrasty scheme. But both provide a great experience, and I really enjoy watching videos on the Pixel 9 Pro. So for the Immersion, I'm gonna give it a good 8 out of 10. And then lastly, we're gonna cover the multitasking. So with the Pixel 9 Pro, and hasn't really changed with the 10 either, they're very similar phones. It's gonna have the same limitations that all Pixels have. You can have 2 apps doing the 50-50. It did take the 90-10, so now you could do that, which is a must-have at this point. But whichever phone doesn't have it needs to add it real quickly. But you cannot have a floating window. That's one thing that Pixel could really benefit from. But I guess the positive is that you can respond from the notification panel. So you at least have a third option to respond to a message you might have received and not have to close your split screen just to do it. And so the multitasking is going to be at the default 5 out of 10 points because it does not have the floating window. And that's going to bring the total score to a very good, close to the top, 39 out of 50. So let me know in the comments if you have any different scores for any of the categories. I'll be interested in that. And if you're interested in seeing how the Z Flip 7 performs, stick around for the next video, which is coming in 2 weeks.